Okay, I'm actually in Porthcurnick Beach, or heading towards it. I was there this morning and I did a nice watercolour, filmed that for my watercolour channel and for my patrons. One will get the full version, one of course gets the edited version. And I'm heading back down to do some oils now, and I hope to have a swim. So I'm going to catch you all down later and yeah, see how we get on, or get you all soon. There's a lot of people coming up and down the hill. Very, very popular. It's only a small beach, but it's very, very popular. Good few steps to come down to the beach, but it just opens up into this lovely piece of sand. Stunning. That little place to the right is where I was this morning, probably the little bit where I'm going to go back to right now. Yeah, stunning. Look at that. A little pan round. Gorgeous. Okay, I'll catch you all later. Let's get on with an oil. Okay, I don't plan on doing a lot of talking in this. There's an awful lot of people around with dogs and talking and all that sort of stuff. But I'm going to be doing a little scene, I hope, on a long canvas, long panel of Porthcurnick. So I'm going to get into that and see how we get on. So I will probably cut this down for the YouTube channel and just do a little bit of talking here and there, and maybe a little bit of a voiceover if I need to. So enjoy the process, enjoy the painting, hope you get something from it, and I'll catch you on the other end. Okay, first and foremost, what I'm going to be doing is toning down this white panel. Nothing wrong with the white panel, but I do like working off of a mid-tone or stained colour. I normally use either a burnt umber or in this case burnt sienna. I really like the warmth of burnt sienna these days, so I do use a lot of burnt sienna as a ground colour. I've mixed it with a lot of spirit and I've applied it to the board in a very, very thin wash. What I'm going to do now is prepare that further by rubbing back all that paint. It's no good just leaving it as it was, because it will contaminate every other colour mixture that I put on in the future. Now I'm ready to go, and I am just literally putting a sort of a horizon line, a line that I can determine my horizon, which is the far seashore. I'm not as tall as that hill in the distance, so everything on that hill is above my horizon line. The cliff to the right and the sea line, or the line of the sea, comes down toward me, so it's under that horizon line. What I'm just doing is plotting all the various points of this picture as I go. Type of the shape of the hills, the trees, and little identifying features on the far land forms, the houses. This little scene is Porthcurnick, and the area that I'm standing in is the beach nearby called Porthcurnick. Now, I have alluded to that in the sort of leading into this part of the painting, but I'm just sort of telling you now that we've got Porthcurnick in the distance, Porthcurnick, and the rocks right in front of me, and it makes for an interesting composition on the curvature of the bay. What I'm doing now is I'm using a little bit of cobalt blue, phthalo blue, and a very small tap of orange. And I use Winsor & Newton orange for this, their cadmium orange. It just shifts the blue slightly more greenish, or more greyish would be a better term. Now I'm varying the colours, I'm putting more white to it in different places, a little bit of lemon going in as well. That will shift that lovely excess of light in the blue. Adding a bit of white, bit of lemon to that to create some of those streaky forms of clouds that I actually found on the day. There wasn't an awful lot in the form of cloud, but I wanted to suggest some of those little streaky bits that you see sort of in the sky. And as we move to the left of the picture, or my left, the blue sky sort of gave way to more lights, more lemons into that color. So as it transferred across towards the sun, so the sun literally quite bleaches the blue out of the sky, and it gets quite a lemon or coolish kind of look to it. So now I'm using some of the same blue colors, but I've added some more orange into that mix, and I'm turning it into more of a gray. And that's quite interesting because that gives me that nice depth of sea color. I'm adding a lot of light right there near the shoreline of Porthcurnick, because the light is starting to hit that. The light is starting to move across my picture plane. And indeed, as I go through this picture towards the end, the whole of that light source changed, and it became more and more intense and moved across the picture plane. But you can't change your mind. You really sort of decide where you're going to put that light, stick with it. The moment you start really changing it all, then you're going to come unstuck. Now, I do sometimes change a little bit. It becomes so obviously in need of being changed, and you can do that. But if you keep doing it, that's when trouble will start, and that's when, of course, you're going to end up with just a whole painting full of muddy old greys, and it'll be lifeless, no light in it. You're going to regret that. So what I'm mixing up for now is some of the dark green colors, some of the phthalo green, a little bit of orange, a little bit of red to grey it down. You know, we're using a lot of complementaries to actually change what you see that green as, whether it's a dark green or a hot green or a cool green. We're using its complementary to actually kill off the greenness, if that's the right way to say it. But at least you understand that by using complementaries with each other, you can make a what I call a chromatic or color grey. I'm actually jumped on a little bit, and I put in some of the houses. Now, they're beautiful fishermen's cottages along here. It's really, really an iconic little Cornish village and little harbour inlet and safe haven for the small fishing fleets that these little villages used to have. There's a nice high wall coming down to this point, and the harbour area will be put in right at the last minute. But I'm just trying to establish the many shapes of the little buildings that I can see way off in the distance there. And they are the easy ones, believe it or not, because what happens is as you go down towards the point of the harbour, then the houses sort of nestle in all directions to fit them onto the hillside. And it seems that, you know, they're in a massive array of ornamentation, for one of the best way. You know, they come this way, they go that way, they're small, they're large. But it was quite an interesting project to try and consider the drawing aspect of all those buildings. Now, I am not trying at this point to create those buildings as they actually are. Be crazy at that distance with the information that you would need to put in to try and put it in. All I'm trying to do is little taps of colour to suggest the particular buildings that I'm trying to render. I'm looking at the shape, choosing a colour, looking whether it's hot, cold, if it is dark or light, and trying to create the shapes that I see and not try and think of them so much as houses. Does the house stand at the end with an apex to the roof? Is the roof side on? All these questions that you've got to answer as you go on through the painting process. Okay, so now I'm just putting a very quick dark mark in along the shoreline. Now the tide is rising quite fast. You don't realize just how quickly the tide does rise and fall. Certainly noticeable on the rocks and the shorelines around Cornwall. Certainly, as far as I'm concerned, I've noticed that. And you can quite easily start chasing it. You know, you start at low tide, and all of a sudden, all those lovely rocks that you drew in, that you wanted to paint, have disappeared on you. They're under the waves now. So, indeed, on this picture, I was painting away, and before I got to the end of it, I had to suddenly stop. Well, I actually finished it, but I really did get very close to having to stop abruptly and move everything. And I looked at a guy who was looking at me, and I said, "Are you local?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "How long have I got?" And he said, "Not very long. You're going to have to move pretty fast because the water comes way up here, way up past where he was standing." I had no idea how far that tide was going to rise. I would have probably been standing up to my neck, even under the water, had I been able to stay where I was. So it's just something to bear in mind, that if you are starting at, say, low tide, you do know that by the time you probably finish the painting, the tide is going to be really different. And many of the little bits and key features that you may have started the painting to do will have gone, disappeared, and changed, certainly. So anyway, back to the painting. I've started putting some more detail into some of the buildings, putting a little bit of light marks along the shoreline on the far bank, but I'm also putting some darks in and looking at the suggestive marks that I'm using. I'm using a sort of fairly wide brush. It's a dagger brush. I got quite used to using them on this trip, and they are quite angular, so they do give sort of great use of different marks that you can leave on the canvas. Now, as I come to this little corner, I'm actually making those rocky colours a little cooler, put a bit more blue, a bit more white in, not too much white, but just to make them a little bit cooler as they come round out of the light and into the shadow. There was a vast array of different colours that I could see in the rocks, and on that far distance, that's another layer of rocks as it goes on around and into the bay before it comes back round to Porthcurnick. They were a myriad of different cool colours and warm colours, light colours and dark colours, but they were all almost like massive shards of rock. They didn't appear to be very, very soft rock. They were sort of almost as though they were chiseled and quite angular and fractured. And there's an amazing array of rock there. But I wanted to try and capture it as best I could, so I used a lot of warm darks and a lot of cool greys. I'm actually coming back in now and adding a little bit more cool colour in more blues, dirty greys. These blues are made up with orange and blue. They're sort of, again, using complementaries to suggest the coolness, but with a little bit more blue than orange, so that there's a little bit more coolness and a bit more white. And white also actually cools a colour very, very well as well. Now I'm putting in a bit of green, a little bit of cobalt green, a little bit of phthalo green. Again, I'm mixing up what I'm seeing with complementaries, so I'm darkening it, killing off the actual pure greenness of it, because it is quite silhouetted against that light of the sky. It's not until it comes down to the side and nearer to where the rocks are does that green start taking on a lighter form, and maybe a sort of cooler yellowish colour, and even some oranges getting in there from some of the flowered or dead flowering bits of plant life in there. No idea what some of those small plants are. They're beautiful, but they're obviously able to withstand the salt atmosphere of the coast and thrive very, very well. As some also, along with some of the very coarse grasses and sedges and other things that are growing there. Now we are sort of closing in for the kill, and I'm starting to add in some of the light forms on the rocks. There was a lot of light still to be found catching the sun, and I wanted to pick some of those out as I move towards the conclusion of this painting. we're done with the background, we're done with the sky, we're done with the sea, all bar a little bit of white water. So now I'm starting to look at some of the fresher sand colour that's between some of the many or myriad of small rocks on the foreshore in front of me. The sand I didn't want it all to be one colour. I used ochres, oranges and whites to create that. And I kept looking at it and saying, do I want this? And partly the trouble was, to be honest with you, that I had the colour of the ground a little bit too close to that of the sand colour. So some of it got a little bit confusing for me towards the end. But I did actually add a few other colours in, cooling it off. A little bit of blue, a little bit of the colour that I used in the rocks as well went into that. But I'm also aware that I need to put a nice shadow right in the foreground where the rocks that are in shade in this far right hand side actually create a nice shadow as well, because the sun has by this time moved quite a way over. The tide is coming up very fast, and the rocks that you see me painting just now, those middle ones and certainly the ones near the water's edge, have all disappeared by now. I am it's got to be said, I am working from memory in that area, but I put a little bit of shadow area on the sand created by the rocks and moreover the cliff edge that you can't quite see in this picture. It is to the right of me, but it is also huge and it's creating this great big shadow, and I wanted to depict that because it's a nice lead-in line to the whole composition. It sort of goes up through the rocks, it touches that piece of cliff side, and then it imaginarily it goes round the bay, so it takes your eye in, leads you in and takes you round. I'm just finishing off with a few bits of details on the windows of the buildings, and it's crossing eyes and no, I get that wrong all the time, dotting I's and crossing T's, but it does at least just put a finish and as much detail into that background as I need to be. Just tapping in a little bit of light that suggests the harbour walls, and it's a beautiful little harbour. If you're ever in Cornwall, head for Porthcurnick, because on the Roseland it's got a lovely little harbour and 2-3 rows of fishing boats are always to be found there, and it's got a lovely slipway that you can walk down, and it's actually got some nice gardens above the harbour that you can sit in and enjoy the view and seeing everything that's going on. I'm just putting a little bit of final detail into the water. A bit of white water will appear, certainly where it's thrashing up on the rocks in the foreground. I also want to put in a little catamaran that has been sitting off the harbour entrance all the course of this painting, and I'm just putting in the mast now. I didn't make too much of it, I just wanted to suggest that there was a vessel there. It also gave the whole thing a little bit of scale and added that extra little bit of life or detail to complete the painting. Okay, so the painting's all but done. Now, I did a voiceover for very specific reasons. On the day of doing this, in the afternoon, the beach was heaving with people. Kiddies screaming, having lots of fun, lots of laughter, people enjoying themselves. I got to say, tons and tons of dogs barking with each other, at each other, whatever. But I felt that it would be just too distracted to try and do a talk while I was actually painting. So I felt that I would just cut the video down to a manageable size and do a voiceover. I hope it hasn't detracted from you enjoying this video. I do hope you've managed to get and learn something from this painting as well. I had a lot of fun doing it. So with that all said and done, I'm just going to let this finish off, and I hopefully catch you in a future title coming up soon. All the best, guys. Take care, have fun, and stay safe with lots of happy painting. Bye bye. Hi guys, well, the sun has just dipped down behind me, so a lot of the beauty of the view in front of me is gone. Just now it was bright as anything that you could think of. It was absolutely a jewel everywhere you looked. But it's been a great day, and I just wanted to show you a little watercolour. There's a little watercolour of the scene. Hopefully I've tried to capture the wonderful light of the evening. It's now just gone 7:15, so I'm going to head back to the campsite and cook myself something and hunker down for the evening. I'll pick you all up again tomorrow sometime, I guess. Have a nice evening.